Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of TV and Us, a conversation show about the TV series we just can't stop talking about. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And each season we focus on a different show, reviewing it episode by episode, and we invite you to watch along with us. Right now, we are reviewing The Bear Season 2, and today we are right at the halfway point. We are at episode 5, titled Pop. If you haven't watched it yet, this is your spoiler alert. Please check out the episode before continuing to listen to the rest of our conversation. All right, Sarah, kick us off with an IMDb summary for the episode Pop.
While the whole team is working to prepare for the opening of The Bear, the renovation work starts to get out of hand, which threatens to put a strain on the plans for the restaurant.
All right, as we predicted, as we expected, the stress is mounting, the tensions are growing, and the chaos is continuing to unfold as it looks like an absolute demolition site for the restaurant. They are so far from getting to where they need to be. They've got 6 weeks left.
Yeah, and they have no walls, no
walls.
Plumbing, no electricity.
No electricity.
We're doing great.
No, we got to steal them. Got to steal the electricity. Okay, let's start off with our episode titles of choice for episode 5. Sarah, what is your episode title?
My title is Amperage.
Nice. Yes, that is there's some great moments that happen at the end of this episode. My episode title is Speciality. All right, let's dive right into our thoughts about this middle point in season 2, episode 5. What were your thoughts about this episode?
I think it's so interesting to think about this show as a whole and how these episodes are spaced out, because we just watched the episode where Marcus is in Copenhagen and it's so peaceful and it's serene and wonderful and you're just having a great time with Marcus in Copenhagen. And then you come to this episode and everything is absolutely insane. And you see tensions flaring between everyone. You know, as we predicted, the more stress they would feel, the more tense everyone would become and people would start lashing out. And we see that a lot between all of the different conflicts that are happening between everyone. And it's just fascinating to watch these characters in this really tense and stressful situation, and the way that this show is able to so efficiently show where all of these characters are at, you know, because we're seeing Tina growing and like really like stepping into leadership and really enjoying cooking and learning and all of these things. And then you see Richie and Sugar just going at it and not getting along. And you see Sydney frustrated at Carmi. And so there's just so much going on in this one episode. And it doesn't feel overwhelming, but you understand what each of these characters are facing and how they're bringing their past experiences, their personalities, their baggage, their strengths and weaknesses, all of it to this situation. We're just seeing those things collide. And so I think this is such a good episode at illustrating, man, this team is going through some stuff and dealing with some dysfunction that they have to work out if they want this restaurant to survive. So just a good level set on where is everybody at, what's going on, and are they going to be able to open a restaurant in the next 5 episodes? We don't know, because it's not looking good right now.
It's not looking good as they like walk around this giant echoey space that has no equipment, no electricity, nothing. It's going to be quite the feat. But yeah, one thing that I love about the show's construction of the season, like you're mentioning, if we zoom out for a hot second, is the way that people's tensions and stress don't always peak at the same times, and you kind of see everyone oscillate back and forth between them being the one that can be a little bit more calmer, resolve arguments, resolve tensions, or they are the ones that are in the thick of it. And so episode 7 of season one was particularly fascinating because everyone's stress and tension and frustration all peak kind of at the same time in the same moment. But it really creates this interesting, like, shifting people dynamics when some people are at their wits' end and are blowing up, and other people are able to be the calm, stable, some relatively somewhat more calm and stable ones to diffuse the situation. So, for example, in this episode, it's interesting that Sugar and Richie are the ones that are reaching those tension points. And I think that you've seen that progression over the past four episodes where Richie's feeling this identity crisis, he's lacking purpose, and he's lashing out in that way. You see Sugar's dealing with the pressures of like her literal pregnancy, growing a child inside of her, and also managing everything else associated with the opening of the restaurant. And them two kind of peak and spike at just the right moment to collide with each other in this really big blowout. But Carmi and Sydney are the ones that I honestly, their frustrations I think are growing and their tensions between them are growing that will peak in a later episode. But in this one, they're able to remain a little bit more calm, keep their cool. Sydney kind of removes herself from the situation because she knows that this is not going to be a good ending. Carmi is the one that's able to kind of negotiate with the two of them to help diffuse it a little bit. So it's really cool to see the way that the roles that the characters play in these stressful situations are constantly shifting and changing. And so I feel like we're going to see that dynamic change again in the next and the next and the next episodes as perhaps Sydney and Carmi come to the end of their patience and their ability to remain calm, and perhaps Richie and Sugar are able to play different roles. So just in general, I think the show is really smart because it feels dynamic when those people dynamics are constantly shifting and changing, and we don't have big blowout and then everyone's calm all at the same time. So that's really neat, and the way that the show constructs those. I'm envisioning these like lines on a graph, and episode 7 of season 1 is like everybody's line is at maximum stress, and in this one we see the line shifting and changing as some peak and some dip.
Yeah, which makes things so much more interesting, you know, because you have those different dynamics, and you see I really love the different contrasts that we have in this episode, because we see Tina succeeding, we see Ibra who is struggling with something, but like quietly and internally, and so like it just gives you all the feels and you want to give him a hug even though he's under stress. So you see a different way of dealing with that. And then you see Carmi taking steps of growth while also kind of screwing over his partner at the same time. And so he's a mixed bag. And then you see the stuff with Richie and Sugar too. So it's all so different and also dynamic, and is rooted in these characters' personalities and who they are. And that just makes it even more interesting and exciting to watch.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point, is that even the trajectories of stress for all the characters and how they react is very different. Like you mentioned, I think Richie's probably the most like immediately expressive in his stress and his tension. Like he's loud. He's got this channel that just comes tumbling out of him, and it is very different from the other side of the spectrum of Ibra, who his reaction is to isolate and to regress within himself, and to stay disconnected from the group and from community and from relationship. And that's his coping mechanism. And I feel like we as human beings all fall somewhere on the many different spectrums of how we deal with our own shit. And when we are not feeling whole, how do we react? And it is cool to see the way that they react very differently.
Yeah. So, do we want to dive deeper into some of these characters?
Yes, let's do it. Where should we start?
Where would you like to start?
Well, while we're talking about Ibra, two things I want to say. One is, I hope we get more Ibra, because the show, as I've mentioned a million times before, is so good at teasing and giving us crumbs to hold on to. Like, I think the past 2-3 episodes, one of my looking ahead bullet points has always been, what is Tina and Ibra up to? Like, how are they growing? What are they, how's culinary school? You know, it's this big new season for them, this new time period and transition for them. And you see the way that their arcs are diverging. Tina is thriving. She's really committing herself and diving in, and also opening herself up to new friendships, new relationships with her fellow classmates. And you see Ibra going a very different direction. And then it's cool because they both start from the same place of starting this new chapter, this new endeavor together. But the way that they're taking it is very different. And the show's given us, it's satisfied my curiosities about how Tina is doing and how she's growing. But the show gives us just one long zoom in shot of Ibra, and you can tell like he is not well. He's not in a good headspace. He hasn't clearly contacted anybody else in this crew, and so that's all the show gives us. And I'm like, oh, there's so much behind that. There's so much meaning behind how his mental state that we feel in that one shot. But also, I just want more. I want more. I'm greedy. I want more Ibra. I need more content related to him and his whole storyline. So it's really effective because the show keeps me wondering, keeps me curious, but also it gives me enough to hold me over to whenever the next moment we get to learn something about him is. So the show is really keeping him top of mind for us. And there's not even just that one shot of him, but also there's a succession of 2 or 3 other scenes later on where Tina comes and asks, hey, have you heard from Ibra yet? No. Okay. Carmi says no. And then there's another scene where she calls him and says like, hey, like, where are you? You know, and I love that little moment where she's like, don't be weird. This is weird. Don't be weird. But his presence is extending beyond the scenes that he's in. So I too am curious how he's doing. You know, we just want the best for him and we want him to grow. And clearly he's not in a good headspace. So the show's ability to keep us engaged on all of the storylines, even the ones that aren't the main center of this episode, is always really, really great. But especially, I think with Ibra, particularly for me, I'm like, what a tease! What a tease! And I'm going to come back for more for the rest of this season to know how his story arc plays out.
Yeah, it's really effective because you feel his absence, and I think even the social dynamics in the team are really interesting because I think, like we talked about in the last episode, like Marcus is like some of the relational glue that holds this together, and he's in Copenhagen. And then I think the others that hold this team together are Tina and Ibra, because you see throughout the other episodes, both Tina and Ibra able to call people out or diffuse situations. Like I feel like Ibra was really good at that with Richie, of like being able to just like
Yeah.
joke with him and be playful with him and help him process through things, and Tina too. And so it's kind of interesting that these 3 characters that are so central to this team and help this team function are all somewhere else, and we're seeing these other personalities really clashing with each other. And I wonder if some of that is, I mean, obviously the stress of everything that'll create tension, but when you don't have those peacemakers or those people that you can process with on the team, that will just heighten all of the tension and stress that they're feeling. So I think it's really smart the way that this season is structured, because they've taken away those safety net characters, and so then that will just amplify the reaction of these other characters who are left at the restaurant.
That's so good. That's a really, really great point, which is that you're right. Marcus, Ibra, Tina, honestly, Sweeps as well, are the ones that are often the ones that are a little bit more calm, a little bit more level headed. They are the like sounding grounds for people to just let things out, and they often are such a balance to the bigger, more hot-headed personalities that tend to be a little bit more explosive in nature. Sugar, Carmi, Richie, Sydney, Fack, honestly, like the differences in those, the way that they show up in group dynamics is so different. And honestly, a lot of the people that are in that first category are not here. Marcus is gone, Tina is gone, Ibra is gone, Sweeps is around, but Sweeps versus all of these other big hot-headed personalities is quite the feat. So yeah, that's a really fascinating point, and the overall group dynamics feeling kind of a little less balanced now.
Yeah, as they are barreling towards this restaurant opening, and then you have somebody like Uncle Jimmy coming into the restaurant and commenting on all of the things, because you already know that things aren't good. But then when you see the financial backer walk into the restaurant and you're looking around and going, "Oh no, we're so much worse off than I thought before." That will just add an additional level of stress. And Uncle Jimmy has such a big personality. It's really fascinating. I loved that moment when he's talking and and Richie keeps trying to interrupt him and he's like, "Shut up, shut up." And then you see the way that Sugar handles Uncle Jimmy, and it's really gross how she does it, but it's effective. And so you see these two who are both trying to lead, trying to be in charge, and Richie's way of doing it is just not receptive, honestly, to like anybody, because even the other workers call Sugar boss and not Richie. And then you see Sugar being able to like handle all of these different things and
Mm.
understanding like, okay, so this is for Uncle Jimmy. I In order to get these things done, I need to respond in this way, or and
So
just her.
funny.
I mean, really, she's manipulating him, but that ability to understand what people need and how to like connect with other people, she gets, and Richie doesn't. And so I think that just adds to that tension and that like clashing of heads that we see from them throughout the entire episode.
Yeah, especially because Richie's already dealing with this like crisis of, am I useful? Am
Yeah.
I not? So her ability to quickly get to what they all need as a group, and him not able to do that is touches on a delicate little nerve for him. But also, I love the shot that the show cuts to of Carmi and Richie's face as uh Sugar's doing her schmoozing thing, and they're both just like, yeah, 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 this is
Hmm.
really good. This is really good. Like also in shock of just like, that works. But it's something that also that in the like relational dynamics, Sugar clearly has this soft spot for sorry, Uncle Jimmy clearly has a soft spot for Sugar, and she is able to finesse in that way that it's just not part of the relational dynamic that Uncle Jimmy has with Carmi or Richie. And so I love the way that you see Sugar understand that relational dynamic and just finesse to their advantage to get shit done.
Hey, it's 6 weeks until this restaurant opens. You gotta do what you gotta do, especially when you currently don't have walls. Like,
Yeah.
that's fine. Do what you gotta do, Sugar.
Yes. Yeah. And I think what the other thing that's really cool about that scene in particular is how much the show has planted a seed within this episode to seed that moment happening. So you see the way that um, Sydney and Sugar have like a brief little conversation earlier in the episode around how Richie's getting on Sugar's nerves. So you understand, like, oh, this has been building up for Sugar. Her annoyance and frustration with Richie has been building up for quite a while. And so it makes it feel like almost inevitable that, of course, at some point they're going to have this big blow up between her and Richie, because clearly there's been a lot that she has been holding in to try and remain calm and patient with him. But she just can't anymore. He's just too frustrating and causing a total scene. And I love the way that the show kind of clues us into that. And so it makes it also feel like that moment is understandable and almost inevitable that they have at the end of the episode.
Yeah, yeah. And we've seen glimpses of that before too. And I think it's so interesting the way that this show is is showing us Richie's journey too, because it
Hmm.
really is a roller coaster ride. Because some episodes he's very vulnerable and endearing, and it's like, wow, okay, good job, Richie. We're rooting for you, buddy. And then in the next episode, he'll be the literal worst. And so the way that this show is crafting his personality and showing him to us, I think is very strategic, because we're seeing him at his best and we're seeing him at his worst, but there are always these like polar opposites. He lives in extremes, and you never know quite which Richie you're going to get. And I think that
Hmm.
that helps make this show exciting, because you don't know. And he is a big personality that he kind of changes the gravitational pull of the room almost. And so if he is at his worst, then there's going to be a lot of conflict. If he's at his
Mm.
best, then there'll still be tension and shenanigans and foolishness, but it's not going to be as stressful as this. And I'm always curious to see, like, okay, which side of Richie are we going to see in this episode, because
Mm.
you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, no, that's so true. That's so true. And I feel like the show's really smart to pair those really kind of more endearing, softer, more vulnerable moments with him where he shares something key about what he's experiencing right now. And then that seeds us into the next episode where we see him kind of blow up and just be a little shit, but we kind of understand the headspace that he's in and how he's acting out from these feelings of being not enough, his insecurities, like we see that much more clearly because we were able to see some of those quieter moments with him where he was sharing something kind of hard and difficult for him. And so when he's just trying to steal the electricity, we can see that it's out of this desire to feel useful and therefore to feel whole, that he can contribute to the team in some way. And uh, it's also really neat because those quieter, vulnerable moments with Richie are often in these scenes where he's just one on one with someone, or he's outside of the group entirely. So those moments with him and his daughter, versus those other quieter moments when he's talking to Carmi and really like opening up, or even episode 2 of season 1 when he's talking to Sydney and sharing a little bit more. It's often away from this group setting, but his group setting self is him acting out from the things that he shares in these smaller, quieter moments. Um, and I think what's also neat is the way that some of the other characters that didn't get to see that in him are unaware of the things that he's dealing with. So even in that scene where Sugar is talking to Sydney, she says the exact thing that Richie fears, which is he has no skills. I don't know how to use him. He's not contributing to the team in a valuable way. And it's cool. It's neat because we as the viewers have seen Richie express his fear to be exactly that, but Sugar doesn't know it. And so that tension between what we know as a viewer and what the characters know is also really fun and really interesting. So I thought that that whole dynamic was really fascinating in those lines that they give to Sugar expressing her frustration because she's thinking about the team and accomplishing this goal and this big mission that they have. But we know that for the person that is Richie, that is the exact fear that he has.
And I think that also helps reframe that fear, and shows that he's actually picking up on something that's tangible and real. It's this isn't just something that he's manufactured out of pure insecurity, though there are some insecurities there, but this is probably something that he's been dealing with for years, and seeing the way that people look at him or talk about him, and feeling that alienation. So I love that conversation with Sugar and Sydney helps reframe what Richie is feeling, and helps kind of ground it, and like, oh, this is actually like a really real fear and not just him being worried for no reason. So it also speaks a little bit more to
Yeah.
Richie and how he actually is maybe paying a little bit more attention than we give him credit for.
That's a really good point, actually, which I didn't think about it from that angle. But yeah, sometimes, people have these fears, insecurities, even when they're like fabulous at something. You're like, I understand that's a very real insecurity that you have, but also you're just so good at this. But to your point, no, actually, it signals that he's picking up on something that is based in truth and reality as well. And he's not like misassessing his own abilities. Like he genuinely perhaps really doesn't have as much to contribute compared to the other team members. And he's recognizing that. And so you're right. It does give some credits over to his intuition and his ability to see things for what they really are, and to see things clearly about himself, which is really impressive. It's hard to see ourselves clearly, and he seems to be willing to. It's a good point.
What he does with that information is a bit of a hot mess, but we can give him credit when we can.
Yes. Homeboy is stealing electricity from the neighbors and somehow
Oh my
justifying it to
gosh.
himself. That's what insecurity and desperation will do to you. You just want to figure out how to soothe it somehow. And this is your way. And you will go to the ends of the earth to figure out how to soothe that deep rooted fear that you have. Hey, homeboy's
Yeah,
proactive. He's proactive. That's for sure.
he is proactive, but in the wrong way. Like I love that.
It's
Okay,
funny.
the problem is amperage. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. My first instinct is going to be to go and try and steal electricity from a neighbor. Like, what? Why is that your first choice? Why is that where you immediately go to? And then, like, when he's defending all of his actions, he's like, hey, yeah, they're my friends. Like,
Yes.
what?
And then Sydney
Richie?
goes, "Are you
No.
still friends?"
Right. Oh, Richie.
Oh,
What
so
a
good.
character.
Yeah. Yeah. This is getting ahead a little bit, but I'm going to mention it while we're on this topic. But am I looking ahead? I am like really intrigued to see what the show does with Richie's character, because we've we've seen him just like open up in new ways in this season and bare his soul in ways that we hadn't seen at all throughout season one. And I'm intrigued to see if they choose to go somewhere with that, where this really feels like perhaps an opportunity for Richie to really have opportunity for growth or a new season for him, because it's hard to bare our souls and be vulnerable. And the willingness of this character to do that signals that he is looking to change. Like, you can't change unless you're willing to admit things about yourself that are hard and challenging and vulnerable. And the fact that he's willing to signals like, hey, this character wants something different. He wants to potentially grow or find his purpose. He's expressed that, like, he sees the gap in that and wants to close it. And so I'm intrigued to see if the show will give him that opportunity in this season for this character. We've like vacillated and danced around this character so much over the course of season one and season two, and seen some really character defining moments, but maybe the winds are shifting for Richie. I don't know. But I would love to see that. I as frustrating as this character is, I love this character so much because he wears his heart in his sleeve, ironically, in a really fascinating way to me. And even his actions where he's being the literal worst feel really indicative of his heart and where it's at. And I want more for this character. So I hope to see more for Richie from the show. We shall see.
Yes, we shall, because we have a whole 5
Right?
additional episodes.
Yeah.
Who knows what they'll do?
That's what I'm saying. This is like the fun, exciting stage where you're like, ooh, where could they go? They could go so many places. By episode 7 and 8, you kind of have a sense for like, these are the arcs that we're gonna play out, and perhaps this is what we'll see. But it's anybody's game now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep, it sure is.
Okay. Other big thing. Should we talk about Carmi? Carmi's falling
I
in
feel
love.
like we have to.
We have
Yeah.
to. Yeah, they made us wait 2 whole episodes to see the Carmi and Claire moments, and we finally get it with this episode. And I think it is a continuation of things that they honestly were showing earlier of tendencies that Carmi has, which is growth in some aspects of who he is as a person, but also there's some very real implications for his actions when it comes to honoring his partnership with Sydney. Like, he really just kind of does what he wants to, and Sydney's kind of left in the dust to figure out, like, where is Carmi? I have no idea, because he's not answering his phone at all. But you see Carmi in some other aspects open himself up to love, which is so exciting. Like, when he says so clearly to her, I like you so much, I'm like, wow, look at Carmi express his emotions in the moment, in real time, to the person. This is really huge for him.
Yeah, I'm so conflicted about Carmi. The first time I watched this season, I was so frustrated with him the whole time because I
Mm.
was like, "What are you doing with your business? Like, that's great that you got a girl, cool, awesome, but you also have a business that you're trying to open, a
Yeah.
restaurant you're trying to open in 6 weeks. What is wrong with you?" And then this go around, I'm much more, I think, sympathetic to him, but I'm
Yeah.
still very frustrated. So that whole like seeing growth, but also being like, what are you doing? Um, and like living in that state of like, yay, I want to celebrate you for making healthier choices, but I'm also so frustrated at you because you're you're shirking your responsibilities and leaving your partner holding the bag. And
Yeah.
I think that that's why that episode with Sydney, where she went on her tasting tour
Mm.
of Chicago was so important because over and over and over again in that episode, the other chefs hammer home, like, make sure that your partner is solid. Like, that relationship needs to be on point if you're going to do this. And then we see this episode where they're not on the same page and they can't even connect either. Like, Sydney is trying to show him, you know, the small wares and all of the dishes and everything, and then the one that he picks is not feasible for the restaurant, but they can't even talk about it because he has to
Mm.
go off and go do something else. And then he's just on a date for the rest of his episode, kind of leaving Sydney and Sugar in the lurch to deal with Richie and the electrician and the plumber and all of this. So it's just, again, I love the way that this show and this season is constructed because the things that are happening in this episode are founded and influenced by things that we talked about 2, 3, 4 episodes ago,
Yeah.
and they all just feed into each other. And so when you see Sydney stressed, you understand it's, sure, it's the stuff that happened in this episode, but she's also thinking about all of those things that those chefs told her two,
Yeah.
3 episodes ago. And so that's also playing in our minds so we can empathize with her and her reactions to Carmi. Ugh, I
Yeah.
just love it.
No, that's so good. And there's a little comment that she makes where she's like, the menu is booked, because we've seen throughout the show how much her inspiration and the ability for her and Carmi to, like, what's it called, menu jam on the menu, whatever it is. We've seen so many scenes of them in their creative process together and how much they feed and inspire and ignite each other's ideas. And so you can kind of feel that, like, she needs her partner in crime to think through the menu together, and he's kind of absent and nowhere to be seen to make even some of the, like, smaller tactical choices, but even some of the bigger choices around, like, what are we going to serve at a said restaurant that's opening in 6 weeks. That whole bit is also weighing on her as well, which I think is really fascinating. Yeah, the show's really great at, like, creating these moments that feel like they are inevitable because the seeds were planted all along the way, and they are so right for the characters as well. That, like, nothing is surprising, and yet it feels thrilling to experience them, right? Like, Sugar and Richie Blowout, we talked about this as well. It's like, it felt inevitable. Like, at some point that's going to come to a head. And similarly, I think that the way that Carmi's operating right now, which we've seen him do over the course of the past 2-3 episodes, where he's just kind of he's balancing many balls in the air at the same time. Uh, there's a feeling of inevitability that this is not sustainable, and something's going to have to be confronted between the way that he's handling situations right now, because this is not going to work if they're going to successfully open this restaurant and for him to be a great partner to the rest of his team. Something's got to give, and at some point there's going to be a very real conversation that needs to happen. And so the delicacy of kind of the state that he's in is also really interesting to feel as a forward propulsion for the show as well. Like, I'm waiting to see like how will Carmi learn to shift and tune his approach, and who will be the one to do it? Maybe it's Sydney, maybe it's another character. Honestly, maybe it's Sugar, but at some point he's gonna have to like get nudged in a better direction, in a more balanced direction.
Yeah, and it goes back to something we talked about a couple episodes ago of Carmi kind of being unable to do multiple things at once. And he's kind of an all or nothing guy. And either the restaurant is his life, or he has a life outside of it. And he's not good at having both at the same time. And I think this episode is a good example of that, because things are getting hard at the restaurant. I mean, they were already hard, but they're getting even harder and more impossible at the restaurant. And so he just kind of disappears and goes and lives his life instead.
Yeah.
And so Carmi like needs to figure out how to do both, and how to be fully present at the restaurant, but then also being able to leave and go be a human being instead of just a chef. And we'll see if he can figure out that balance, because I don't know, if he wants to have a successful restaurant and a relationship, he kind of needs to figure out how to do both. And right now he's unable to do that.
Yep. Yep. No, that's so true. That's so true. His growth is going to be learning that balance, to allow all of these things to be true in his life, to exist in his life without, operating in those extremes. But his pendulum swung to the other direction for right now, right? He's living his best fairy tale love story with Claire. Okay.
And he went to a party, like
Carmi at a party.
he got to have a good time. He got to be, a social human being.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Yep.
Okay, should we talk about Tina briefly?
Oh,
as
yes.
well?
Yes.
Tell me about your thoughts on the way that the show, this episode, really grows and shows us Tina's journey.
I am such a fan of Tina. I've been a fan of Tina since the very beginning. She's wonderful, and I love her journey, especially in this season. And like we talked about earlier, like she started down this path with Ibra, and now they're going in completely different directions. And so while he is isolating and kind of like shrinking almost, like she is blossoming and expanding, and you see her, she is smiling from ear to ear most of the time we see her on screen. She is getting complimented at school. She's doing a great job, is learning all of the things. Carmi gives her his knife, which is just so really sweet.
Yeah.
And then we see the other students, inviting her out, and she is willing to go. And so we've only seen her operate within this team, and she loves them. That's her family, that's her community. And now we're seeing her connect with other people outside of that. And I love that, because she's no longer, this big fish in this small pond of this tiny little restaurant that's a hole in a wall, but she is seeing herself in other situations where she can also flourish and excel, and she can connect with other people and be vulnerable and express herself in new ways. Like, it's just it warms your little heart to see
Mhm.
her really flourishing, and that's what we get to see in this episode.
Yes, absolutely. And uh, I want to give a shout out to the performance because through the way that the acting is able to just showcase like just so much like history without even saying a word in dialogue, but the way that Tina shows up to the bar, you can tell that like this is not like a normal like weekend or weekday night for her. You know what I mean? This is kind of new. Like, but she is almost like re-blossoming into a version of herself that feels like has existed in the past, but perhaps has been a little dormant over the past couple of years and is now re-emerging again. Like I don't know if you got that sense at all as well, but I just felt like this wasn't like totally like casual, comfortable for her. Like it felt new and exciting, but it also felt like a re-emergence of this part of her that's always been there, you know, and the way that the performance and the acting are able to clue us into so much of like the history of who this person was without ever even needing to say anything at all, just the way that she walks into that bar and finds her friends. Like they just the look on her face, the excitement she feels, but also a little bit of the nerves. Like I think all of that is really fascinating. And then that karaoke performance, man, is I don't know, it just felt like a catharsis. And also there's you see the tears in her eyes afterwards as well, after she sings her song. And you know, just the feeling that there is so much more to Tina and her history and who she is as a person than even is expressed explicitly through the situations that she finds herself in the show, I think is so fascinating to me, and it's something that I really felt during this episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's just indicative of her entire character journey too. Like when we first meet Tina, season one, episode one, she is closed off from the world. She has her walls up, she is protecting herself, and she is dealing with a lot internally. We don't know what, but her armor is on. And I feel like over the course of the show, we've seen her take off those pieces of armor. And I feel like this is one of those episodes where like she is completely vulnerable
Yeah.
and doesn't have that armor on anymore. And so we are able to see Tina, who is beautiful and wonderful and so talented and just somebody that you want to know and want to spend time with. And I think that that's just so beautiful that this show has been able to show us that over these episodes without ever having to have this like really dramatic moment. We've seen it rather than the show needing to tell us
Mhm.
that she's on that journey. And so now when you watch this episode and then you look back at
Yeah.
the pilot, she's a completely different person.
Mhm.
And it's just so rewarding to see
Yeah.
her as she truly is now.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an openness to her that is so endearing and refreshing and feels like a going back to who she really is. Yeah. And that closed off version of Tina was in the pilot episode is this defense mechanism, this kind of resistance to new people, new change, all of that kind of stuff. Her with her little attitude, it's a defense mechanism. And there's something that's really soft and real and vulnerable and grounded about this version of Tina that is just so thrilling to see. And I think it's like also a testament to the way that this crew has created space and drawn out those sides of her. I mean, that's the beauty of really healthy, good community is that it like makes you more of you and gives you space to be more of you. And we get to see that with Tina in this episode. So good.
Oh, I just love it. I I like all of the characters in this, including Richie. There's something endearing about him, but like to see a character really flourish, is just it's so satisfying, especially when and we don't even know everything that Tina's gone through, but we've gotten glimpses, and to see her being fully confident and fully open is just,
Yeah,
oh, it's so sweet.
it
I
really
love
is.
it.
It really is.
Like, I just keep doing more of this, Tina. Like,
Mhm.
don't ever go back to that other way of being. This is better.
Yes, very much so. Okay, any other last shout outs before we give out some awards?
Uh I think it's funny the moment when it's just Claire and Carmi in the restaurant, and then Fack walks in, and Claire's first response is Fack attack. And you have to know when they were kids and they were all, like growing up together, how many times did Fack walk in and say, Fack attack, and like attack somebody or like, just do something silly. So I loved that phrase. And I can only imagine how many times they have heard that growing up. So it's just funny to imagine.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh, and it's just so right for that character too. Like you can just envision him doing that in a silly,
Hmm.
goofy self. Oh, so
Yep.
good. All right, let's give out some awards. The first category is for Top Chef. Who is getting this award for this episode?
I want to give this to Sugar for doing what she needs to do
Yeah,
to
man.
make progress on this restaurant.
Yeah, man. Every team needs a Sugar, honestly.
Yeah.
He was like,
Yep.
no bullshit. I'm sorry, but this is what needs to get done. We got to keep running in the same direction, everybody. So good. She is such a positive addition to this team. Like imagine them trying to accomplish this without her. Like, oh my gosh, they are all talented in their own special ways, but she has a unique talent for uh, the project management of this. My
Mhm.
choice for this award is going to Fack for his pep talk for Carmi. He goes, she
Oh,
is the best,
yes.
and so are you. He's just
So
so
sweet.
silly and goofy all of the time that whenever he has this like really tender moment, you're just like, Fack. It feels so genuine and pure coming from him. It's so great.
Oh, what a lovable character. He's so fun.
Hmm. Okay, the next category is achievement and chaos. Who is or what moment is getting this award?
Uh, I'm gonna give this to Sydney's chaos dish at the beginning of the episode, where she is working at 1:30 a.m. with Tina and explaining this wild, crazy dish that makes no sense and is way too complicated.
And Tina's like trying to bring her back down to earth without having to say explicitly, like this is too much. And by
Hmm.
the end of the
Yeah.
conversation, Sydney's like, yeah, you're right, it's too much. My choice for this award is just generally sad drunk friends. We have all
Hmm.
been the
Yep.
sad drunk friend, but if you've been taking care of sad drunk friends, you know that that is
Yep.
a whole shindig, a whole thing. Lots of chaos. Okay, the next category is spiciest line.
Uh, I want to give this to Uncle Jimmy, who says the Berzado department has a brain issue.
Uncle Jimmy's a hoot. He's such a character, man. He just he'll be surprising in these unexpected ways, and it's really great. He's such a contrast to the rest of these kiddos. So good. That's a great one. Um, my choice for this category is honestly everyone's version of good night in that ending conversation.
Yes.
We get many
Yep.
different flavors and variations, but they're all real spicy. All right, looking ahead, what are you pumped to see unfold in the next 5 episodes?
There's so much that's going to happen.
Oh,
I'm just so excited. There's
what?
there's a couple episodes that I'm like, okay, this is
Ooh,
really gonna be a fun conversation to talk through. So we have some good things on the horizon, some tense, stressful, dramatic things on the horizon. It's gonna be great. I'm
okay.
ready.
That was a good trailer. I like it. I mentioned this earlier, but I'm intrigued to see if they do some really great Richie just directionally some either like more healthy or more unhealthy, but just that they take Richie's character somewhere. I feel like after this episode being kind of in the center and then just the vulnerability that he's showing and opening up with, I think it'll be fascinating to see if they do something with him. I'm intrigued to see, I think Carmi is a ticking time bomb that is it's just going to come to a head at some point. So I'm intrigued to see how that will unfold. And then, yeah, I'm just curious about Ibra. Is he okay? We need to know. We need to know. The people need to know if Ibra is okay. So I hope that this team or Tina or somebody will continue to just like pursue him, look for him, find him, just check on him, just to see how he's doing. He's not doing great. And I'm very invested in that character. So, and maybe Marcus will return. We'd love to see more Marcus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe these that like relational glue of the team can return, and maybe those three characters can come back and, I don't know, help out a little bit, because things are really bad.
Yeah. Which feels right for the midpoint of the season. We gotta like be somewhere low in the middle so that we can maybe end on high. If it's high right now, like that's what the other thing with is Carmi and Claire. I'm like, oh, it's going too well right now. I hope this will last, but I feel like there's going to be some drama or tension there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we will see. We will be back for all those episodes.
We will indeed. All right. Well, this was our review and discussion of The Bear Season 2, Episode 5. You can find it available on Hulu. Thank you for listening to... Oh my God, my voice. Thank you for listening to today's episode of TV and Us. Our name sums it up. We're big fans of TV and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today as we continued our journey through The Bear Season 2. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review letting us know your thoughts about Episode 5. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at tvnspod, or email us at tvnspod@gmail.com. We will be back very soon with Episode 6. As we zoom past the midway point of this season. We hope you have an amazing weekend. We'll talk again very, very soon.